again, everybody, and welcome to the two-man game. I'm Bob Ramsey. That is Matt Rocchio, and we had a full weekend, lots of stuff to talk about. Matt, first of all, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Rammer. How are you?
Doing pretty well. It's busy around our house. We got Zoom meetings going on. We've got podcasts going on. It's crazy at my house. Um, I got a dog that might jump me any minute, so it's crazy around here. But it's good to talk some hoops with you.
Amen to that.
Um,
It was a great weekend of hoops. Maybe it's not some of the results we wanted, but heck, there was a lot of basketball being played, and can't ask for more than that.
Hey, you know what? Let's start off with we don't talk enough, I don't think, about the college game beyond our local team or teams. Obviously, we do the Billikens at length here and occasionally mention Illinois and Mizzou or whomever. Um, but it was really an ugly incident, my words, not yours. I want to hear what you think regarding Juwan Howard in Michigan and Wisconsin and Greg Gard, their head coach. And I can't believe now 30 hours later, people who would care at all wouldn't already know all about it. But a physical altercation at the end of a game that was at best a horrible look for the game of basketball, and at worst, uh, multiple people doing multiple stupid things, and one person after another trying to out stupid the other one, and I would tell them to their face, well, that it was. I really would. You know me. I would, because it
Oh
was
yeah.
stupid and indefensible on again with multiple people involved. So, any kind of general thoughts about the altercation and from when I did radio early today till this evening, Juwan Howard suspended for the rest of the season, rest of the regular season,
Mm-hmm.
which turns out to be, I believe, 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
Greg Gard, who was um, really dumb in some of his stuff and actually lied in the news conference or was at least delusional. And both things either could be true, maybe both. It's really just bad for the game you and I both love.
Yeah, and it was ugly. And listen, I think that the punishment for Juwan Howard's very much warranted. There's just a higher level you have to hold yourself when you're the leader of a basketball team. That's just the bottom line. And so as soon as as soon as you're the head coach and you put on the suit instead of the jersey, there's going to be a little bit more of a higher expectation that you don't let those kind of events kind of happen. And so yeah, Greg Gard made a mistake, I think, by putting his hands on Howard, right off the bat. But I mean, obviously, what Juwan Howard did was inexcusable. I can understand, standing up for yourself and not holding back the words and things like that the way he was with Greg initially. But obviously, as soon as you get to the second half of the incident and you start swinging, and whatever people want to call it, open hand hit, slap, face mush, whatever you want to call it, that's just an inexcusable thing from Juwan Howard. He has to be better than that. And again, but Greg Gard also has to realize, and like you said, his comments after the post game were a little odd. And when we were able to see the exact kind of breakdown of events with our own two eyes, he made a mistake right from the get go by putting his hands on Howard when he didn't like how Howard was, kind of just trying to bypass him in the handshake line.
The
So
blow
yeah,
by. It
yes,
was the blow by.
yeah, it was trying to give him the blow by, exactly, and so he tried to stop him. And so, and listen, there's something you learn in life. There are some people who, man, there are some people out there in the world there. If you put your hand on them like that, even just to like tap them on the arm and just like stop them or something like that, there's some people who do not. I mean, it's immediate. Get your hands off me! Don't touch me! Who do you think you are? I mean, there are just some people like that, and that's completely reasonable. Personal space kind of limits to have. But again, as soon as you take it to the second half, which is swinging on a coach, you obviously cross the line, and the suspension and the fine is very well deserved. And like I said, a lot of stupid people. I think some of the opinions we've heard. I think there's a lot of people trying to excuse Juwan Howard because I think we have a closer relationship with coaches like Juwan Howard, who played in the NBA for a long time, who are a little bit more, in the public light and things like that. I think that's kind of been a weird bias where some people have tried to find excuses for Juwan Howard, and I just think it's really easy to say, listen, the guy screwed up, and he made a mistake that When you're a player, it's just a little bit different, and
Yeah.
that's the bottom line. I don't think it's much more complicated than that.
I personally feel like guards should get some sort of punishment, um, maybe a fine.
I think he got fined 10 grand.
Yeah, maybe that's enough. I don't know. I think lying to the media is as bad as anything, especially sometimes these guys get so insulated. They make so much money and they have such a controlled environment that they're so used to people just going along with what they say. And he was trying to change the narrative. That was insulting. Um, uh, and you can even go back to the game itself, calling a timeout at the end. One guy still pressing, even though the game's over. You've already made your victory cigar by putting your scrubs in. Um, I mean, it's the end of February. They don't know how to break a press. Haven't you been doing it in practice
That's a good
since
point.
September?
You're not wrong. It's a good
Um,
point.
so I'm calling BS on that comment,
Yeah.
first of all. I really am. Wouldn't you just yell out there? I mean, if you were I'd go, Rocc, you don't know how to break a press? What's
Yeah.
wrong with you?
Yeah, that's that's kind of indicative of us. If anything, heck, if I'm guard, I look down the court and I turn the screw a little bit more. I'd be like, oh, thanks for the practice time. We need to get more looks against the press. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
I would have turned the screw a little bit if I was Greg Gard, kind of in a fun, kind of shit talking way.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
You're like, I got my scrubs in. You know what? They don't get enough run against a good press. Thank you very much, Juwan. You're a good dude.
Great job. Yeah, well, hey, great job with the press. Nicely done. Um, but yeah, I don't want to defend Guard at all because I thought he had a series of stupid things that
Yep.
happened there. And one of them was grabbing Jawan's arm. You could say, you could rationalize, he was just trying to, hey, wait, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
That's probably true, but you had to see that Howard was incensed. And there are some people, maybe even yours truly, who may or may not have a bad temper. Depends on people who know me, and you may talk to them, Rocc, maybe in younger days, maybe not so much younger. When you've already hit the breaking point, you got to put them in a cooling tank.
Yeah.
The nuclear cooling tank.
Yeah. The white flash is not far away.
It's just the wrong thing to do, and it's a dumb thing to do. I would like to know what the Wisconsin assistant coach said to get Coach Howard to DEFCON 1. I would like to know what was actually said. But at that point, it probably didn't take much.
No.
Because it was already, the volcano was already exploding. One thing I do appreciate, and I hope to talk to him about it someday, our old friend from St. Joe's, Phil Martelli, is the associate head coach for Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Phil Martelli, folks, is the absolute salt of the earth. By the way, everybody I've talked to, and I've talked to friends in the business, says Juwan Howard is a tremendous guy.
That's all I've ever heard too.
He just clearly has temper issues in the heat of competition.
Yeah.
Again,
That's
there may be those who
have
I've
a 20-year NBA career, though. I mean,
there might be those who I've competed with and against who might say similar things. Don't know. Not trying to bring up the past. Not trying to dredge it up. I'm just saying I get those things. Both things can be true. You can be a tremendous human being and also be a guy who has a low flash point in competitive situations. Both of those things can be true. But anyway, if you go back and look at the video, anyway, all the angles I've seen, the coolest head there had to be Phil Martelli. Nowhere to be found in any of the video.
I'm not surprised.
Here's a guy that's going.
That he knows what he's doing. He knows how the game's played. He knows how to play this smart.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, it's like he's kind of like that veteran baseball player who, when the scrum happens, you see him on the outside and he's talking to one of the other older guys on the opposite team, like, "How about these young guys getting their licks in? How about it?"
You should read the American Classic Ball 4. Jim Bouton, the author, former big league pitcher, talks about when the scrum happens, look for somebody you know on the other team and pretend to wrestle around a
Yes,
little bit and
yes,
laugh and talk
exactly.
while the other guys are really fighting.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
exactly right.
And hell, Martelli's old hat. I guarantee you, if he was in Greg Gard's position on the other side, on the other bench, I guarantee you, he would 100% would have been like, you know what, we needed a little bit more press breaking on tape. Thanks, coach.
That's probably right. That's probably right. Okay, enough of that. And did you? And I'm sorry, I missed the guard fine. Was that? Did you see if that was from
I think it was.
Wisconsin or the league or?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I just saw a headline that had Juwan Howard suspension 40 grand, and then Wisconsin's Greg Gard 10K. I believe
Hopefully,
the
it was from
big
the league.
it is a Big Ten. It is a Big Ten
Yeah.
fine for Coach Greg Gard, 10 grand. Yes.
Now, and here is the final stupidity play of the whole deal. The NCAA comes out and is condemning Coach Howard for what? Fighting, yelling, losing his mind, making contact with another person. No, for not wearing his mask at the news conference. Are you kidding me? What the? I'm beyond speech. I am sans speech. Without speech.
That's ridiculous.
It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Are they
Anyway,
do the Big Ten rules not allow them to fine him 40 grand for punching an opposing coach? Is that not allowed within the bylaws? Because if not, that's hilarious, and I want to see some very, very angry Big Ten coach take advantage of that loophole.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to idiocy.
Speaking of getting hit in the mouth,
idiocy, stupidity to horror, and that's what happened to the Billikens, who got into a horror show at Davidson, who dominated the game, start to finish, and moreover, in every single category you can measure in basketball. It was an absolute, complete ass kicking.
Yeah, from start to finish, it was
unbelievable.
They
I talked to Travis Ford tonight on his radio show, and he did want to see, because I know coaches, if you can find something you want to chew some rear on, he went back and looked at the 14 made threes. Yeah, 14 made threes by their account in video check. He said 9 of the made threes were absolutely earned by Davidson. Absolutely credit him. And 5 that the Billikens defense was culpable. So if they earn 9 threes, at some point you go, okay, we got to move on. In fact, as I said, Travis wanted to look for some things to carry over, but he said they pretty much just put it away and moving forward on that one. That was just a horrific showing, and you got to move past it and hope you can. He said you got to hope you're going to be playing your best basketball moving forward. Also talked to Billiken backup point guard DeAndre Jones. He said the same thing. He goes, they beat us. They beat us bad, and they did it. Respect them, and maybe you hope you get a chance to play them again in the conference tournament and turn the tables.
Speaking of which, the conference tournament, the schedule is broken out with the Bonnies winning 5 straight, and obviously St. Louis losing 3 out of 4 here. They have fallen to 5th in the conference at 9-5 so far. Half game back right now on the Bonnies in the loss column, ahead by a full game because Richmond's 8-6. For the 5 spot, but obviously the important part is, can they jump the Bonnies for that 4 spot? The last 2 games here on the schedule that you're going to have to win them. Obviously tomorrow's against St. Joe's is obviously a must-win, but my biggest issue with that game just has to be, where's the offense against a team that's not a dominating defensive squad? I mean, it's one thing to get absolutely just rolled offensively by Davidson. That's going to happen all the time, but I mean, that's going to happen from time to time, but to not be able to score more than 30 points in either half against Davidson, even when you do get jumped like that, that's a huge red flag when how much we've talked about how that's been a strength for St. Louis this year has been the offense.
Well, here's part of the problem. The offense works. I don't want to make this a semantics thing, The offense works, but the Billikens, by my count, missed. Oh, and Travis backed me up today as they looked it up. I believe they missed 8 shots, 8 or 9 shots inside of 2 feet. Inside of 2 feet. So basically layups. And what happened, you went silent on us, Rock.
They missed like 5 of their first 6 right there in the paint, like to start the game. It was right off the bat, just could not score in the paint at all. And against Davidson, not taking anything away from their big men or just their defense, but it's just you look at the numbers. That's a team you should be able to score against.
And then you take a look and you say, okay, but what exacerbated, you miss a layup and they come down and hit a three.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that 8 or 9 times in a game. It's
Travis. I saw that quote post game. I think he said we're trading missed twos for made threes, and you're going to lose every time on that.
Yeah, and my partner Earl Austin Jr. Brought that up as the game was happening. He's going, this is a bad formula. This is not the way to do it. But I think you're right. In addition to that, the Bills could not penetrate the defense and couldn't get good looks from the perimeter. And I think Travis Ford mentioned to me that they showed zone. They hadn't played it all year. So apparently some teams are thinking two things. And I'd like, because you're a really terrific X's and O's guy, you really look it over. Two things that are obvious. Well, three things now. Started early in the year. We can't let Gibson Jimerson catch the ball. 1. 2, we're going to run 2 people at Yuri Collins whenever possible. Cut off the head of the snake, the body will die. Mm-hmm. And they continue to do that. And 3, the Billikens have not shown a consistent ability against zone defense to find the open spaces in the middle of the zone. So those are 3 things that I think are on everybody's scouting report right now.
Well, right off the bat, because I'm glad you brought up the zone factor. But here's my big thing. There's 2 ways to beat a zone. One way is to find the holes in the middle of the zone, and that can be really easy if you have a dominant big man. But also the other way is to shoot over the top of it. And St. Louis is one of the best shooting teams in the A10. And so I guess I'm a little bit confused why zone, in the very few times they've seen it this year, has confounded them so much. And maybe it's because inherently the idea is that Travis Ford wants them to be the team that breaks the zone in the paint, in those dead areas instead of shooting over the top of it, which is completely reasonable.
No.
You have the shooting.
I just here's the deal. It's not one way over the other. The Bills basically play 4 out with 1 big. But what's happening is, in my view, is if the Billikens aren't going to flash people to the middle, and they're not, then you can overextend the defense. That's what I'm seeing. You're 2 steps outside and overextend. They don't seem to be worried about the middle. I think the Bills have to exploit them. And who is the one guy that exploited zones from 15 feet out? Javonte Perkins.
But here's my big question though, because 2 of the most constant pieces of motion we see in the SLU offense is that they'll loop a guy behind the center to kind of open up a little space and get guys moving, and they'll also run have guys run drag across kind of free throw line to pull people across that way as well. It seems to me like a lot of that kind of motion would inherently be good as kind of the base motion to attack a zone. And it's already kind of instilled in your offense because those 2 spots are literally getting you to a baseline dead area in a zone, depending on what kind of zone you're facing. But still, most of the time you're talking about a baseline dead area on that looping back thing, on that little back motion. And then when you're coming across, you're at 2 different points. You're dissecting both the kind of the elbow extended areas that you can attack in a zone that way. And so I'm wondering maybe why that isn't just a part of their offense, that they just maybe initiate a little bit earlier to attack zones when people break that out. Because again, it's not. I could understand a part here where Travis says we don't see a lot of zone. We didn't expect it specifically against them. We don't have those plays ready, but that just seems like something that's part of your offense and could be a counter to zone if you start seeing it. And I didn't see a lot of that, and that was a little disconcerting. Just the way that zone has stopped them, it's a problem because even though it's been limited minutes, everyone has that tape now, and when you have a little bit of extra time to actually practice and game plan around the tournament, well, now people can maybe start pulling that out like we saw Davidson did when SLU didn't expect it, and that's proven to be
Yeah,
a problem.
those three things that I mentioned are all going to have to be addressed over the next couple of weeks. The problem is you're still playing every third day until the end of the month, which is luckily only a week, 8 days away. And then you'll get a couple of days before VCU comes to St. Louis, and then you'll have 4 days or so, 5 days to prepare for your first opponent. So it'll still be learning and adjustments, all the way through. So you got St. Joe's at home. You got to respect them. Big, long, 6'7" point guard, and they will. They'll attack. They'll shoot threes in volume. All five of their players shoot threes. Then you go to Richmond, who would love nothing better than payback for the Billikens running them out of the building in St. Louis. They still have designs. While the Billikens are trying to leapfrog St. Bonaventure, and I'll get to VCU in a moment, Richmond wants to jump over SLU, right? And then you go to Rhode Island, who has shown they can be dangerous there, and they love to play the spoiler role, and they'd like to climb in the rankings. They can't get to a double bye, but they can get a better slot if they can move up. And then you come back against VCU, which could be, if you start to try and look into the crystal ball, that last home game when VCU visits St. Louis could be playing for the fourth spot in the double bye situation.
That'll be a good test to see what the offense is doing these last few games and kind of going into tournament time, because VCU obviously, they don't mess around when it comes to the defensive end of the basketball, the defensive side of the basketball game, and so that'll be interesting. Obviously, like you said, St. Joe's, you got to come out and you have to do what you've been able to do against, the bottom half of the A10.
Right.
What you for the most part, aside from UMass in the one game. What you'd be able to do against, George Mason, LaSalle, and those kind of things. Just you just have to come out and play your game and show that it was a blip against Davidson, and that the idea of throwing this one throw this one in the trash and move on is kind of a solidified idea here. Again, I'll just say that the exact same things I said before the Davidson game. Which is, the offense has to keep rolling, and the word keep you can now toss out there, and has to get back to rolling, and the centers just have to be a more dominant force, because where it was trending with Linson and Okoro in November and December is just not where we are right now, and that's been an unfortunate kind of lag behind on this SLU roster. But if they can kick it back into anything close to what we saw earlier in the season, I would get a lot more confidence in how this team could play come tournament time.
What would you think production-wise is acceptable? You get 40 minutes between the two, and I'm thinking there's no reason you shouldn't get 15 and 10 every night.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely, I think, the low level of what the expectation should be.
But the other thing is defending the post, and that's probably more important than the offensive production.
Yeah, and we've talked about Martin Linson, and there's some I've been very confident in his defense this season, and again, that's been part of the reason I've used the phrase "lags behind" just a moment ago, is because his defense hasn't been there, especially one-on-one. But we know he has the fundamentals. We know he's not outsized. He's not just getting beat up in the post there. So that's a huge question mark. And then Francis Okoro, I mean, this is a guy who people inside of the team, or people who have watched St. Louis basketball for 30, 40 plus years, yourself included, have talked about this guy like he's a top 3, top 5 athlete the program has ever had at his size. And so to have him struggle as well, even when you take into the fact how young he is, that's also been a little disconcerting. And so 15-10 is the low mark. And it's just both of these guys have the tools. Whether you talk about the skill or you talk about the athleticism or a combination of the two, it's just so odd that they're having trouble. Honestly, when you look at those factors, and I kind of tried to ask Travis this in Francis Okoro had just had one bad game at that point against LaSalle, and so he kind of was like, I'm not worried yet, but it just seems there's a confidence factor in there.
I think that's right.
That's the only thing I can take from guys who are this talented, this skilled, this athletic, and we're showing it in the non-conference play against arguably better players individually, and we're just not seeing it right now. Confidence is the only thing I can come to.
I think there's no doubt about it. When you watch up close, the extra double clutches and moves instead of going up confident to dunk and those sorts of things. And I think the confidence will come. Will it come tomorrow, next week, next year? I don't know. But he's a great guy. He really works hard. He's got the ability, and it'll come.
Yeah, and so seeing how Martin Linson and Francis Okoro play, obviously against St. Joseph's, they got to dominate that game, and then the offense, the offense has got to get their legs back under them. Those are the two things you have to see, and then if the defense continues to struggle, especially inside, that'll be problematic. And then obviously after what happened against Davidson, and again, I know you talked about how 9 of those ones were just Davidson working incredibly hard to get an incredible
and getting
shot.
Incredible shots,
but still. You have been a team that's been able to run people off the line. If all of a sudden that's, kind of a sieve that is opened on your defense in addition to the problems in the paint, and if St. Joseph's of all teams is able to score, 60, 75 points against you, that's all of a sudden something that's going to still be kind of a red light you're going to have to watch for as the regular season closes out.
Yeah. I think that's true. And I would just want to flip the coin and say, even if you run St. Joe's out of the gym, it doesn't necessarily mean that the ship is righted. No. And I think the Billikens will play a good game Tuesday night. I believe that. But then can you carry it over to Richmond? We haven't seen a lot of carryover in games sometimes. Dominating the bottom half. You got a good win against Dayton. You've beat Richmond, who's just behind you, but a top half of the league. You beat George Mason. You got to pick up a few more of those upper echelon victories.
And there's VCU right there at the end of the season.
And there's VCU right there at the end. So the Bills will play St. Joe's at Chaffetz Arena, and I hope there's a big crowd. The team does really feed off of that. So let's move to the pro side. It was kind of a week off for hardcore analysis because it was an NBA festival, if you will. And I thought there were some really good moments. I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. We talked about it the last podcast, the Rising Stars Challenge that was later that night. I had a lot of fun watching it. Getting to watch a guy like Scoot Henderson, who's just so freaking young and should be a senior in high school right now, compete against guys who are 22, 23 years old and play like he did was incredibly fun to watch.
Yeah.
I thought everything around the 75th anniversary was just,
tremendous.
If you're a fan of basketball, you can't
tremendous.
ask for anything more. You had Michael Jordan show up, and obviously he's hugging everybody. I don't know if you saw the clip last night where him and Magic Johnson are joking around, and he says, Magic, if you got your tennis shoes,
let's play right now.
One right now. And Magic's laughing, and Michael Jordan was not laughing. That man was 100% serious about that. A die-hard serious about that. I thought that was great. But just everything you got to see. One of the things that I thought was so fun is that me and my roommate watched the draft they did of the 75th anniversary team with a bunch of different teams. Jerry West was one of the GMs. Dominique Wilkins was one of the GMs. Dominique Wilkins took himself first overall, which is hilarious. Jerry West was he was so into it. This is a guy who has seen everything, who's played with the greatest players, who's drafted some of the greatest players ever, and he's just into this dorky little TNT thing where they're drafting a team, and he's giving thoughtful analysis. It was a lot of fun. At one point, he's talking about how he loves thoughtful players and intelligent players, and he had Charles Barkley on his roster. He's explaining this, and at one point you just hear Kenny go, "Then why the hell's Chuck on your roster?" It was just the back and forth between all of them was hilarious, and it was incredible. And then to top it all off, and this is something that I was kind of saying throughout the broadcast of that little draft thing, is, and then we heard it in the game last night, Shaq talking about what this weekend meant to him. And
Very
my
impressive.
my favorite thing about that was every time, and during the draft, you heard it a couple times, he always called him Mr. West. And I'm like, that
Hmm.
man has been listening to that guy tell him sage advice for 30 years. And I don't know if there's a person on the planet that Shaq respects more than Jerry West. And just the way he called him Mr. West every time was beautiful to me. But then obviously the way he talked about his high school coaches, his college coaches, what Kobe means to him. That speech he had about what that weekend meant to have all these greats in one building. You still have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's able to come to these events and things like that. It was just a perfect moment.
I agree.
If you're a basketball fan, to have all these incredible players, and we're blessed to have so many of them still with us, and to hear them speak and to hear them interact was just, I mean, that was a perfect weekend. And I honestly even think some of the basketball stuff was fun. The dunk contest sucked, but beyond that, the actual basketball stuff was pretty fun. And I thought the All-Star
It
game,
wasn't really a
yeah,
game, but it
no,
was a fun exhibition.
yeah, I mean, Steph Curry hit 16 three-pointers, and like 10 of them were from like 45 feet. It was
I thought he was
fantastic.
playing for Davidson.
Yeah,
That was a
right.
callback. Sorry.
No,
Um,
hey, listen, that you can never go wrong with that callback. That's the first tournament I ever like sat down and I was like, "This is incredible." I fell in love with Stephen Curry and Dave when I watched that first run he had with Davidson. So listen, that reference always plays on this podcast.
so, um, if you don't count their age, but just who they were as players, was that the counting? So you counting the actual all stars there, and then you count the guys in street clothes. Was that the greatest assemblage of basketball talent in the history of the world?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. You had arguably the three greatest players of all time in the building at one point with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, and LeBron James, whatever order you want to put them. That's just, right there, just three of the best players to ever touch a basketball in the history of the freaking sport were in the same building at one time, and that's not even including the fact that you have like 75% of numbers 4 through 100 also there that weekend. Charles Barkley was there, Magic Johnson was there, Dwayne Wade, all the more recent guys. Kevin Garnett was there. It was just, yeah, it's the greatest assemblage of talent I've ever seen in my entire life. It was, again, Jerry West was there. I'm pretty sure if you went through it, there was probably somebody had a ring from like every year going back to like 65. And,
Yeah, probably
that's
right.
something maybe not that long, maybe like 70. But that's what we saw. It was almost every single Hall of Famer who's still with us was there at one time. And
Yeah,
obviously, basketball is a more recent sport than some of the other ones. And so again, you had three of the greatest of all time. That's you just don't get to do that in other sports. And at one point you had two of them hugging each other and breaking it down in a very thoughtful way with MJ and LeBron. So it was incredible. The NBA did it right on this one. Getting all those players together
yeah.
was amazing. And then again, I thought the game was honestly kind of fun too because I know we got cut off with my computer dying the last episode, but I even kind of like the targeted endings. I think are really fun. Having a point total that everyone has to get to, I actually really like what it does. And
Hmm.
I know ever getting to the point where that's how we end real games that matter in basketball is probably very far away, but I like that they're experimenting with it. I like what we saw with Curry last night. I love what they did with the Diamond Anniversary. All-Star games are hard to get right, but with all the stupid little stuff the NBA did around it, again, that TNT draft of the top 75 players, it's on YouTube. You can go watch it. It was fun to watch. Doing those kind of little things, All-Star games should just be a bunch of dumb, fun little things that make you realize why you love the sport and the
Celebration of the
history.
game.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It should be, like a tiny little like World's Fair thing where it's like a museum exhibit
Yeah,
every year. That's exactly what it should be. And the NBA had a perfect opportunity with the 75th anniversary, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. The only thing that sucked was the dunk contest. That was literally the only thing.
not good.
So
Yeah.
it's hard to get everything right the way they did, but I thought they did a great job.
Yeah. In fact, uh, it kind of inspired me. Earl Austin Jr., my broadcast partner, and I, folks, were talking. We think we can figure out how to do it and get it paid for. Take an extra day next year when we go to UMass and go to Springfield and just spend the day at the Hall of Fame.
God,
You say, well, you go there every year, but the schedule's so tight.
yeah.
You just, to be able to go back and forth, you drive by it, but to be able to take the 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever, to go through the Hall of Fame. But we decided we're going to do that.
Yeah, I think that would be that would be so cool. And one thing I thought was funny though on the NBA TNT thing, they were drafting teams. Sue Bird on her team had both Larry Bird and Kevin Garnett on her team. Can you imagine the players that they would make cry if those two had ever played on the same team together? That would have been the greatest thing. Like, I just saw those two. There were a couple other pairings I saw that I was like, man, I would love to see that in real life. And the only one I can't stop thinking about is Larry Bird and Kevin Garnett would have gotten like sued for like verbal assault and battery by multiple teams had they played on the same team together, and it would have been hilarious. And that's why those weekends are fun, because you get moments like where you get to think about that.
The opposition would have to, along with the trainer, have a team psychologist. He's hurt. It's his feelings that are hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Again, because Google both these events. Larry Bird has the greatest piece of trash talk ever, which is the Christmas present story. Google that, and then Kevin Garnett has the single most piece of uncalled for, crossing the line trash talk ever. Just Google Kevin Garnett, Charlie Villanueva. It's the most line crossing crap talk ever. It should never be said. It should never be uttered again. But it also shows that the man had just no filter at all.
So before we have to employ a filter, give me a look ahead to the coming week. Second half starts for the NBA, and it's time. Not that teams aren't playing around, but they're resting guys, and all these kinds of things. It's kind of time to get after it. We've talked about how tight the East is going to be. You better not squander very many games, or you're going to put yourself in a really bad spot.
Yeah, and right out of the gate, we don't have games unfortunately until Thursday. But right out of the gate, the game that can kind of get you ready and really, send you into the second half is going to be Boston and Brooklyn. So these are both teams
Yeah.
that I think are going to end up higher in the standings. Remember when I talked about it the week ago, talking about how I think everyone in the East is going to be in a different spot. Right out of the gate, these are two teams I think are going to be higher in the standings. Boston's at 6, Brooklyn's at 8, I believe, right now. And I think both these teams are going to be on the rise. Boston has kind of turned the screws and become a really tough defensive team. And if Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, especially Jason Tatum, can continue their kind of offensive surge, and it's more of a getting back to where they should be, less than it is kind of improving on it, but getting back to where they should be, the Celtics are going to be more dangerous than obviously the Nets. The big question is, are they going to be in the playoffs with a healthy Kevin Durant? But Ben Simmons coming in, Kyrie Irving probably playing more games. I think the Nets are going to make their move up at least a spot or two, probably to the 7th or 8th seed. So right out of the gate, you get a great matchup between those two teams in the East, Nets and Celtics on Thursday night. A little bit weaker in the West. Golden State's probably just going to pound Portland. But, I mean, keep your eyes on that one, because the Anthony Simons things is they're winning games somehow.
Yep.
And then obviously I think a lot of people didn't realize it until it really got hit on. If you were watching some of the All-Star game coverage, again, Cleveland's the big surprise of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So keep on watching out for them. They got a game on Thursday night against the Pistons that they have to win. Can they keep their top 4 spot? That's probably the most likely one that's going to drop if other people are going to make a jump. Evan Mobley's a monster. If you haven't watched the Cavaliers, try to find a way to watch them a little bit, because this guy, 7 feet, springy as hell. We talked about it a lot with Hassan French about that second jump. I mean, Evan Mobley, that guy, I feel like he gets 3 in before other people get 1. It's ridiculous how springy he is. So I mean, the Cavaliers are going to be fun to watch. They're in action as well on Thursday night. So there's kind of some East primers. We're going to be talking a lot of East here in the second half of the season to kind of get you started in the NBA on Thursday night.
That's Matt Rocchio. Rock, thanks. We'll talk to you Thursday, and we'll get the second half of the NBA season going, and we'll preview the Billikens on the road at the University of Richmond. For Matt Rocchio, I'm Bob Ramsey. Thanks for joining us on Two Man Game right here on Claibs Online.
St. Louis Acura was the #1 Acura dealer in Missouri in 2021, and we were the 17th in the nation for Acura sales volume. We sell over 100 pre-owned vehicles monthly, and we service all of the makes and models that we sell. We are waiting for verification of our 30th Acura Precision Team Award, the only dealer in the nation with so many awards for customer satisfaction and dealership performance. We have 300 pre-owned vehicles in stock right now. St. Louis Acura, better than ever for you.